Hello everybody, I'm Tom Colohue and I'm here to break down the SummerSlam match card preview, including news on Liv Morgan, Pat McAfee, Edge and plenty more before we wrap up exactly what is going to be featured on this year's SummerSlam card. Be sure to like and subscribe the video as we jump into what's going to happen, what the plans are, and beware of spoilers ahead for the match card, certain people's contracts and more. If you don't know me already, I'm the guy who first reported that Sasha Banks was seeking legal aid to get out of her current WWE contract, so about 3 weeks before it started becoming regular news from different wrestling reporters. So let's jump straight in. Firstly, I want to talk about one of the matches that's confirmed. I have a list of confirmed, listed, and then outside chances. The one I want to start with is Liv Morgan versus Ronda Rousey. Now, quite a few people are assuming that Liv Morgan is basically doomed in this one, and I do feel that's a rhetoric that's been fed by a number of different wrestling journalists. However, the WWE have not yet made their mind up as to what's going to happen in this match. There is still a possibility that Natalya will feature in order to essentially take the pinfall, though there was an issue between Liv Morgan and Natalya at a recent live event that is said to not be completely wrapped up as of yet. Ronda Rousey, of course, is a favourite at this point in time, but I do believe she is not likely to regain the championship that quickly. Charlotte Flair is expected to make her return shortly. She was initially expected to return right after Money in the Bank, but with Liv Morgan, with the change that was made so that Liv Morgan became the winner of Money in the Bank, the WWE have saved Charlotte Flair for a little while longer. The second match that I want to talk about is Bobby Lashley versus Austin Theory. Now, Austin Theory is currently Mr. Money in the Bank, and he essentially won that particular briefcase to try and create a little bit of extra tension with Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, which will be the main event. Now, while that's not the only reason he won the briefcase, that is the main reason for SummerSlam that he will be featured. The match with Bobby Lashley is designed so that he can pick up a loss, be taken out in a strong way, and then tease the audience with a potential cash-in still to come. Bobby Lashley will be retaining the United States Championship, I'm confident of that, and this is part of a strategic section of people within the creative team who have been told, get the United States Championship, get the Intercontinental Championship on the card no matter what you do. More on that later. Next up is a tag match between the Usos and the Street Profits with a special guest referee. A lot of people get the feeling that it's going to be Solo Sikoa. I'm personally leaning towards Sami Zayn. The match itself is pretty much guaranteed to end with the Usos standing tall, but it's what happens after the match that's going to be the most interesting. The WWE for a while now have been looking forward to splitting up the Street Profits, and this is the next step in that. Angelo Dawkins was originally slated to be the heel, however, upon being told by someone in the WWE that he simply isn't as good as Montez Ford, Dawkins has been upping his game recently and having some very, very good performances. With this in mind, the WWE are certainly considering the possibility of a heel turn for Montez Ford instead, which is a very exciting prospect for me. Speaking of heel turns, for those of you who stuck around after hearing about Liv Morgan and Ronda Rousey, there may well be a heel turn in the Liv Morgan-Ronda Rousey match, or at least after it. Pat McAfee versus Baron Corbin is all lined up. The idea here is to regain some heat for Baron Corbin so that he can stay in and around the top level. Come the draft, he is expected to be heavily featured. I suspect he'll be moving over to Raw, and there's been some discussion about that, as someone who can compete at the top level against people like, for example, Bobby Lashley, and others like Cody Rhodes upon Cody's return. They are heating Corbin back up to be a high-level heel. As regards Pat McAfee, this is part of his new contract. That contract does have on it several wrestling matches per year. There is a set number. For example, Edge's was reportedly 5, though that clearly isn't the case anymore. Pat McAfee has a single-digit number of wrestling matches that is on his contract, which is a wrestling contract. It features wrestling matches, whereas the last one did not necessarily feature wrestling matches, but he was able to get a few wrestling matches in there anyway. And of course, the last match that's already been announced is our main event. Roman Reigns defending the undisputed WWE Universal Heavyweight Championship against Brock Lesnar. Now, I've been assured that both men are planning to tear the house down. They are planning to go to war and basically destroy the arena because they are fully aware that the WWE are not that excited about this particular match. And by WWE, I should clarify, I mean the WWE Universe. The fans are not that thrilled, and it was not the WWE's first choice. The company themselves wanted Randy Orton to be in this spot. Austin Theory has won the briefcase after Cody Rhodes was unable to compete and thus was unable to win it, which does mean that we are looking at Austin Theory at least teasing a cash-in when it comes to these two men. However, we will still have the Usos essentially playing blocker for Roman Reigns, and this would be also a perfect spot for Solo Sikoa to make his debut. That, I feel, is how this is going to play out. Roman Reigns will not be leaving without at least one of those championships. I'm now getting onto a series of matches that is listed, as in internally listed within the WWE. They are planning for these matches at this point in time. Cards subject to change, particularly if it's not actually been announced already, but these are the matches that are currently being planned. The first one I have to speak about is Becky Lynch challenging Bianca Belair in a rematch for the Raw Women's Championship. This is the third in the one-year series between Bianca Belair. Now, to be clear, the one-year series, 3 matches, is something that they were intending to do with Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks. However, they were not able to get around to the match at SummerSlam because of an unavailability for Sasha Banks, and thus they could not have their third match at WrestleMania as was originally planned. The idea was it would be WrestleMania, SummerSlam, WrestleMania for Bianca Belair versus Sasha Banks, with Sasha regaining the championship at SummerSlam. This naturally did not happen. Instead, Becky Lynch stepped into the breach at SummerSlam and took over the storyline from there. Ultimately, Sasha Banks was going to get what Becky Lynch had until WrestleMania. Becky Lynch defeated Asuka on Raw last week, recovering from the slump that she has suffered. However, that slump and that victory were temporary. Becky Lynch is likely to lose at SummerSlam to Bianca Belair, cementing Bianca Belair as the winner of the feud. Also listed internally is Finn Balor and Damian Priest versus Rey and Dominic Mysterio. They are currently feuding with the Mysterios. Rhea Ripley was going to be going up against Bianca Belair, but she's not currently available to do so to my knowledge. And there is a lot behind this actually going on. Rey Mysterio is still looking at the possibilities for retirement, but a large part of that, and a large part of his actual contract, was that the WWE would have a sustained push for Dominic Mysterio. So they're looking for something new in order to make that happen. Finn Balor is the current leader of Judgment Day. Fans are getting excited about the prospect of Dominic Mysterio joining Judgment Day, which isn't an impossibility. What I will say, however, is that we will be seeing Edge involved in this in some capacity. We've seen the vignettes. Edge will be returning shortly, so it'll be very interesting if Dominic Mysterio does turn, because then we face off with the possibility of Finn Balor, Damian Priest, and Dominic Mysterio versus Edge, AJ Styles, and Rey Mysterio. I can't be the only one just very excited by that prospect. One more match currently internally listed is Walter, the current Intercontinental Champion, defending his title against Shinsuke Nakamura. The only thing I have to add to that is yes, 1,000 times yes, please God, yes, do not screw this up. That's basically all I have to add there. And the final match internally listed is, as has been rumoured, The Miz and Tommaso Ciampa versus AJ Styles and Logan Paul. AJ Styles is there to endorse Logan Paul, to stand in the middle of the ring, holding up Logan Paul's arm at the end of the show, well, the end of the match, I should say, in order to provide that endorsement. The signing of Logan Paul is not designed to appeal to current WWE fans. The whole point of having Logan Paul at WrestleMania and at SummerSlam is to get new audiences in. The target market for the WWE has for the longest time been 40-plus-year-old people who lived through the Attitude Era. Now, of course, they are looking at something fresh and something new to try and compete with AEW. Logan Paul is the answer that they have come up with. There are 4 possible matches that are not internally listed that are possibilities based on current storylines that I just want to quickly run through. We have The New Day versus the New Vicious Viking Raiders. Finally, a formal match. This is pre-show fodder in the extreme. We also have Nikki Cross and Doudrop against Alexa Bliss and Asuka, which once again is pre-show fodder, but that's not the worst thing in the world. SummerSlam, after all, will have a 2-hour pre-show. I'd like to have a couple of matches on there. One thing that feels a bit less pre-show is a possibility of Seth Rollins versus Matt Riddle. The idea here, as it's being pitched backstage, is to remind fans that these two people exist. And finally, a number one contenders match between Sheamus and Drew McIntyre. Sheamus teasing Drew McIntyre as long as possible to eventually land on the SummerSlam card, where Drew McIntyre will win the right to face whoever wins the last man standing match at Clash at the Castle. That is the news. That is the plan. Let me know what the most exciting match to you is down in the comments. Remember to like the video, subscribe for more news, and be aware, there's plenty more news coming. For example, if you haven't already seen it, there is a video on backstage news for Liv Morgan. And coming tomorrow, a video about Bayley. So stay tuned for more. Thank you for choosing myself, Tom Colohue, and I will see you all very soon.